Thank you very much, everybody, for attending this event this afternoon. I'm very excited to welcome everyone in the audience today. This is the Georgetown on the Hill discussions on AI. And the objective of these events is really to bring together the key stakeholders of artificial intelligence, which include policymakers, industry experts, and academics. And what we try and do in this event here today is I try and create a platform where we can share knowledge across these key stakeholders such that we can discuss relevant and important topics around AI and policy with the objective of disseminating information so that we can facilitate evidence-based policy advice. So we're very happy to have everyone here today. This is the first Georgetown on the Hill on AI that we've had. This isn't the first Georgetown on the Hill that we've had in the past, though. We had them up until COVID-19, and this is our reinitiation into policy world again. So we're very glad for everybody to be here. This work complements the ongoing effort and work that we do at the Center of Business and Public Policy, which discusses issues at the nexus of business and public policy. This also complements the annual conference event that we do on AI, known as AI in Action, where again we invite key policymakers, industry experts, and academics to discuss all things AI, which we'll be planning in the fall, which will discuss the topics on AI and infrastructure. So without further ado, I'd like to have our panelists introduce one another to give you a sense of the format of the event. We have 45 minutes for a panel discussion that'll be moderated by myself. And then for the last 15 minutes, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. And followed by that, we'll have 30 minutes of coffee and lunch that we hope that we can further facilitate knowledge discussion with everybody in the room and have a great networking event. So without further ado, I'd like Aaron to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, where you sit at the nexus of business and AI, and then we'll move to the left. Thank you.
Sure, thanks Tim. Hi everyone, my name is Erin McKinney. I currently work on the AWS, that's Amazon Web Services, state, local, and education public policy team. I am a policy counsel for the team, so have a JD and a background in a variety of different business-focused roles, both at AWS and at IBM. Formerly, I used to work in corporate tax planning and really enjoyed a lot of the policy work that I was doing in that realm, and made a push to move to the public policy team at AWS. And now I am focused on mostly analyzing and reviewing the state and local efforts around AI policy. Many of you may know there's been hundreds of bills introduced in the states this year during these legislative sessions and in the 2024 legislative sessions. So my role is primarily to help educate my team on the basics of AI, how AWS's work in this space may be impacted by policy efforts in the states and in the US overall. So thanks for having me today.
Hi everybody, nice to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Fabio Luzzi. My background is in statistics, economics, and computer science. I've been working with data and analytics my entire career in different shapes and forms and in different sectors, including technology, consulting, payment services. I've been working with data and analytics in different shapes and forms, different sectors, including technology, payment services, risk management, entertainment, and fashion. I work for Tapestry. You may be not familiar with the name, but you probably know our brands, Coach, Kate Spade, and Stuart Weitzman. I've been in Tapestry for 7 years, and I lead the data and analytics team. So I leverage these capabilities to really help drive business growth and have an impact on the business. So it's a journey of business transformation. And today, I'm excited to share with you how data and AI play a key role in that effort. So I think of the context of retail and fashion.
Okay, I'm Avi Goldfarb. I'm a professor at the University of Toronto. My research is on the economics of technology, and for the past 10 years has been focused on the economics of AI. So trying to understand the changes that have happened as machine learning has gotten better, impact on the labor force, impact on healthcare, and impact on the regulatory environment and market power.
So as you can see, we have lots of experts here, both across the business application, the policy area, and academia. So we're excited to engage these topics as we go forward today. So one of the ways I would like to start this discussion today is first about trying to understand what AI is. And this is actually a really important question because there's no universal definition for what AI is. The best thing, closest thing that we have is an understanding of agreement from the OECD. And that's what it entails, but not what it actually is. So I'd like to start the question first by talking about AI as a technology. And we know previous technologies, we typically think about them as tools that create efficiency. But it appears that AI takes this step slightly further, given the fact that it learns and adapts over time. So could we briefly explain how AI differs from previous technologies? Avi, could we start with you?
Sure. So the reason we're talking about artificial intelligence in 2025 is because actually a very particular field of computer science called machine learning has gotten better. And what machine learning is prediction technology. It's computational statistics. Okay. Computational stats is a little less exciting than AI, but it is the same thing in many ways. It just turns out that when prediction, like computational stats, gets good enough, all sorts of things that we may not have imagined can be solved as a statistical problem now can be, including writing and coding and drawing. And what that means is, unlike previous technologies, this learning role through data is going to be different in understanding AI policy than, as compared to, say, internet policy or steam engine policy or electricity policy, what you might think of as the historic, impactful general purpose technologies.
That's great.
Maybe I can add
Fabio, can you
something
jump
there.
in there?
Yeah, so I can add something there. That was great. So I think when you think about the past, automation technology was more about following a script. And today, with modern AI, I think it's more about, these systems not only understand the script, but they can enhance it as things change. They can come out with a new script that was never seen before, and they can change different scripts together. So it's a completely new way of thinking of technology. So in the past, the system, yes, they did understand data and they did extract value from data, but they had a lot of need for human intervention. They was mostly focusing on single tasks. They could not generalize, and the domain knowledge would come from the human. So imagine an assistant that is very clever, but is very good at executing instructions. Today, we're moving more towards a system that can generalize, owns the domain knowledge and understands it, and it can chain tasks together. So now it's more of a flexible, intelligent partner that understands your business and can give you suggestions, not just follow execution. So obviously this changes pretty much everything.
Great. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, just to add on to Avi's point, I was thinking this is where you were going, but I think the reason why we're here talking about this today and why policymakers are so interested in the topic of AI now really has a lot to do with the introduction of generative AI, which is one subset of the AI umbrella. And you mentioned, there's lots of technologies underneath this umbrella, but generative AI having hit like the public consciousness and having, like an actual individual interaction with, AI technologies on a day-to-day basis really sparked this interest in, everyone from academia to industry and policymakers to take the technologies, to the next level in terms of, public awareness and, thinking about different ways in which constituents and consumers should or may be, protected from some of the potential risks of using these technologies.
That's really great. So I think that gives us a sense of what AI is. I think the next question is, how is it being used? So Fabio, maybe we'll start with you. Thinking about industries and firms that are utilizing AI, can you think about effective strategies for utilizing AI? Could you highlight some specific examples or areas of expertise from your background?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we are in the context of retail and fashion. So retail, just to give you some context, is a very complex industry, retail and fashion, especially if you design and manufacture your own products. The lead time is very long and complex. It takes a long time between setting the targets and having the product available for sale. There's a lot that happens in between. Planning, merchandising, buying, supply chain, logistics, allocations, stores, marketing. It's just, I like to think of it as a relay race where each business unit passes the baton to the next one, and the baton is the common denominator, is data. So there is a lot that happens here, but it's a very data-rich reality, right? So this combination of having a lot of data and complex dynamics makes it a perfect candidate for leverage AI to improve business processes and have an impact on the business outcome. So just to think of an example, so one of the most important things for this business is getting the right product in the right place at the right time. So when a customer walks into a store or when they browse online, they find what they were looking for and they ideally purchase it today or maybe 1 month later. So, and that decision takes into account many different things, especially when you have physical locations like stores. So, customer preferences, customer shopping behavior, customer sensitivity to price, location, weather, seasonality. So there is a lot that goes into it. So, we use AI to process all that information and ultimately optimize the assortment in the store. So the likelihood of a customer walking in and finding what they need, it's more probable. And so also another way we use AI, so the business leaders, especially Gen AI, which is more new now. So business leaders are constantly asking questions to find insights that can be translated into an action that then ideally has a business outcome. So you can imagine our data fabric as a gold mine. So we're constantly looking for those gold nuggets that can help us take an action that translate into a business outcome. But the business leadership know that when they ask a question, there is a lot of people mining that gold mine, and they probably get an answer 3 days later. And maybe most of the time it's trivial answers. So with Gen AI, imagine blasting the entire gold mine and getting a bunch of gold nuggets all at once, because we are really reducing now the time that takes to find those insights from days to 0 minutes. And that's multiplied by many questions and many people across the company. So those are a couple of examples.
Great. Bobby, would you like to add to that?
So there's, I think about various applications. So there's a bunch that we just heard that are good old-fashioned prediction problems, right? So maybe the oldest and core application of machine learning in business is predicting whether you're going to pay back your loan. Okay, banks have been using machine learning for a long time to predict whether they're going to pay back your loan. What's changed that you started hinting at in the last couple of years is we've realized that there's a lot of business applications that you didn't used to think of as prediction that are now prediction. It turns out filling out forms is a prediction task. That's filling in missing information. And so any time in any job somebody is filling out forms, in principle, that can now be solved with generative tools. In medicine, diagnosis is prediction. How does your doctor know what's wrong with you? They're taking in data about your symptoms and filling in the missing information, the cause of those symptoms. That is something that we didn't used to think of as prediction, but because when we talk about this transformation of machine learning from stats to artificial intelligence, that's what we mean, that there's these new applications for data that we never really imagined before. And so that can be, maybe the one that's already having a first order impact on lots of the economy is coding. So you may not have thought about what computer scientists do as prediction, but it turns out a lot of the task of writing code is just filling in missing information. And it's pretty obvious if you know what you're doing, what you're supposed to do, you still have to type it and do it precisely. But machines can now do that as well or better than most humans. And that has made coding much, much more productive across all sorts of industries.
Yeah, it's really good. Aaron, would you like to add something?
They covered a lot, but I'm trying to think, at AWS we have, and every company really that's in this space has hundreds of thousands of use cases from a variety of different types of customers. I really like an example from the ag tech space, the agricultural space, where they're using some of that predictive technology to understand when there could be a potential wildfire in California in a certain location, or in terms of maintenance, at manufacturing facilities or really any facility, to sort of understand the trends as to the temperature in a certain facility and how it should be adjusted, or maybe there's a part of like we were just talking earlier about refrigeration units. Maybe there's a part of a unit that is malfunctioning, and artificial intelligence technology can, identify that before, a maintenance worker can. And so those sorts of efficiencies are coming up with like all of our customers, and they're coming up with really interesting ways to use the technology for their unique businesses.
So that's really exciting, in that it seems that there's a growing increase of use cases where artificial intelligence can be applied. But obviously there are some bottlenecks to that, and obviously the bottlenecks appear at the sector level, but also at the use case level. So could we discuss a little bit about areas of the economy or society where AI isn't diffusing quite quickly, or where there's been bottlenecks to their adoption, and explain what may be hindering that? Fabio, would you like to start?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in my opinion, I don't think there is a specific sector that has challenges. I think it's universal. Obviously, the level, the size of the challenge can differ, and I think to keep it simple, I think you can summarize that the challenge depends on the level of maturity around three main areas. One is technology, the other one is culture, and the other one is structure. So I think it's possible to identify main pain points. When you think of the reality of the single enterprise, one is data. There's no way you can scale AI if you don't have a good data posture and a good data governance. Then there are situations where sometimes teams don't understand, what's possible to do with the AI, and sometimes they don't trust it. And sometimes, it's not clear where the funding is supposed to come from, and even there are situations where there is a gap between what the business is asking and what the engineers or third-party providers are building. So I think it's universal, and there are different things that can be suggested to help in this journey. And obviously, these pain points that I described, they are more obvious, in my opinion, in non-technology companies, right? So you can think of sectors like manufacturing, retail, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, there are exceptions, but in general, in this industry, it's not scaling as much as in other tech industry. And I think that's happening because there is old system in place, the digital footprint is not mature, the data is not organized, ownership is is distributed, not centralized. So there are a few things you can do. One, start small, identify a use case. I think it's important to always start from a business use case with a clear outcome, measurable outcome, and then identify the technology that can enable it. So I think a lot of people make the mistakes of doing technology for technology, AI for AI. AI, just like any other technology, is there to enable an outcome. So that, and then it's important to bridge the gap between tech and business to really understand how those use cases can be addressed, and investment in data posture. So that's what I think. Those are the building blocks. Invest in foundation, especially non-technology company. Invest in foundational capability where AI can scale. So digital footprint, data capabilities, and then overall at a macro level, I think it's important to continue to encourage collaboration between different sectors. So like public, private, and academic. There's no way that these sectors can figure it all out by themselves. So the public can help with funding and governance, the private can help with speed and real-world use cases, and academic can help with in-depth research and talent development. So
that's great. Fabio, you want to jump in there?
Yeah. So where we've seen clear and widespread adoption is when, at least so far, AI can fit into an existing workflow. You think about it as what we call a point solution, which is there's a workflow, like say in financial services. They used to have some process for detecting fraud, and now on top of that old process, they've added an AI prediction about detecting fraud. No one needs to do anything really differently in their job. It fits right in the workflow and it becomes more effective and more efficient. Okay. Where a lot of the biggest opportunities are when you have to change the workflow. And so a real challenge and barrier is recognizing that the highest potential, arguably, in terms of the productivity impact in AI requires a change in workflow. And so the industries that can't really adopt AI easily within their existing workflow are lagging behind and are struggling to figure out what that new system looks like. So for example, healthcare and education are two industries with extraordinary potential to be transformed by AI. Okay. But in healthcare, that requires all sorts of differences and all sorts of changes, right? Doctors right now, or primary care physicians, for example, are responsible for diagnosis, for prediction. Okay. In order to have machine doing diagnosis, you can imagine that enabling, essentially superpowering nurses and pharmacists and other medical professionals. But that's not how our system works now. And we need to sort of design a new education system, figure out new regulations to make that happen. And so the transformation of healthcare at that level is going to be a much heavier lift. It's likely to happen, but it might be years, if not decades. Just to give you an historical example on this, electricity was clearly going to be transformative to the economy if you were paying attention in the 1880s. Edison's patent was in 1880. But the median American household and the median American factory were not electrified until the 1920s. It took 40 plus years because just adding a light bulb to an apartment that used to have a candle didn't do that much better than the candle. You had to start redesigning and rebuilding your housing stock in order for the light to be useful. And the same thing happened on the factory floor, which is just electrifying your power source, replacing a steam engine with an electric motor didn't do that much. It was only when Henry Ford and others started to realize they could redesign the factory that we had the big impact change. And so when we think about barriers to AI, we do see lots of adoption on, hey, here's my workflow. How can I insert an AI tool within that workflow? There's been lots of adoption there. But once you start thinking about changing that system, it's a heavier lift, and we're only starting to see it in a handful of industries.
Yeah, I agree. I think I can add, so that's a great point because, as you said, I think it's very difficult. So you will only see double-digit increase in business outcome, going back to the retail of the enterprise. You will only start seeing those double-digit impact when you change the process flow. So it's not just inserting a prediction into the flow, but it's about redesigning the entire process. So imagine going back to retail and assortment and allocation. Imagine a system, an AI system that can not only predict demand, forecast demand, but can also identify gaps in supply, can make recommendation on store allocation, and even suggest promotion to rebalance inventory. That's a collaboration across different touch points on the value chain that carries on intelligent automation, right? So that's not just taking one piece and replacing a human prediction with a machine. It's about redesigning the entire flow. But I think the beauty of these new technologies is that now it's possible to redesign processes because you have the technology. So there is this kind of symbiosis, like you can come up with a new design of a process flow because you have the technology. You couldn't have done it 5 or 10 years ago because you would have had a massive engineering effort, a massive cost. So the two things go together, right? You can design new processes because you have these capabilities, and these capabilities works better when the process is optimized.
This is really good. So we touched a bit about what AI is. We've talked a lot about where it's being applied and where it's not being applied and what the bottlenecks are to AI. I think I'd like to transition a little bit about how AI is affecting people and affecting companies and their productivity. Aaron, I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about AI and jobs and skills. Could you give us a sense about the types of jobs and skills that AI will create or affect? And what do you think that'll look like in 5 to 10 years?
Sure. Well, I think, the simple answer is AI is likely to affect every job in, a matter of 10 years, or most of them. And I think, I really liked Avi's example of Edison's patent. I think, we're likely to see that transition towards using AI tools and systems like very sporadically and, pick up pace and slow down as, different companies and different use cases are utilized and testing these systems. But I think our responsibility on the industry side is to make sure that learners are educated and upskilled and understand the technology and how to play with it, how to sandbox new solutions. One of the things that we really drill down on and also make clear to policymakers is we feel an obligation to the workforce in general to help them come up with these new and different types of careers that weren't in existence before the Industrial Revolution or the tech revolution or before cloud computing came on the scene. There's all these sorts of positions that are being created. We talked yesterday about prompt engineering as a subset of AI technology and classification that needs creative thinkers. It needs folks who don't have a computer science degree to come up with really interesting questions and ways to get to solutions that can help train the underlying AI models to produce these new and different images and text and video and that sort of thing. So
I
yeah,
agree.
lots of ways.
Yeah, I agree. I expect in 5 to 10 years that these capabilities will reshape and elevate a lot of the workforce. So imagine this situation, just going back to examples in the retail or supply chain in general, right? So, because I think the underlying shift, so it will depend industry by industry, but I think it's an underlying shift that I think it's already happening, which is we're moving from a more manual and reactive to a more strategic and data-empowered roles. So imagine a situation of supply chain, like there's a port closure, which we're familiar with. So imagine the reality, non-AI reality, right? So there is a product manager in supply chain that finds out what's happening, probably late. Now he has to scramble sourcing information from different sources that probably are contradicting each other. And now he has to make a decision on what action to take that will have many downstream impacts. And he has to predict what's the impact on which decision he will take to probably 5 or 10 downstream impact. So take that and move it to an AI strategist. The AI strategist will immediately know what's happening, one single source of truth. He will already have a list of actions that he could take, probably ranked by risk. And for each action, there will probably is going to be a sizing of the impact that it's going to have downstream. So basically, the outcome is very different, right? From guesswork to more informed decision making. So I think the skills that will unlock this, it's really skills that can help embed AI in business processes. So skills that can help bridge the gap between business and tech. So functional engineering is one that comes to mind. But obviously, as you mentioned, a lot of new skills around, using all of these capabilities responsibly. So around ethics.
Bobby?
Okay. It's a really hard question. And I'll give you an example of why it's a really hard question. So my first book on AI came out in 2018, a book called Prediction Machines. And we did the book tour, and as part of that tour, people would ask me this question: what skills, what should I teach my kids? And what seemed obvious in 2018 was that writing and coding seemed like great things. Avoid radiology and avoid truck driving. Okay. But it turns out, here we are in 2025, radiology and truck driving are still not automated. They might be, but they're still not automated. And writing and coding are genuinely under threat. Okay. And so what makes it a really hard question is just anticipating what the next wave is going to look like is hard. You talk to folks at Anthropic or OpenAI in terms of their public statements, they're saying things like anything that takes a human 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 hours on a computer is likely to be soon done by AI. Okay. But there's all sorts of human processes in the background that aren't really done on the computer, that are about telling the computer what to do. And so when we think about the core skill set, the easiest answer is just to say, you got to learn how to learn, because 10 years from now, almost surely the skills required in the labor force will be different than the skills now. And that means you still have to be able to learn at 35 and 45 and 55. The slightly more nuanced answer is we need to think through as what's left as the machine gets better and better at filling in missing information. And that's ultimately going to be a combination of action, of care-focused things where we really want a human there, and what we call judgment, which is understanding what matters and being able to tell the machine what we want. And when we see what the machine's output is, to say, no, that's not what we want. We wanted something else. And so, but underlying all that is going to be really this core skill of being adaptable in the workforce and learning how to learn.
That's great. So I think the message that we're getting from the panelists here is that AI is really a moving target, and technology is progressing so quickly, and that gives the exact motivation for why we're doing these events here on Capitol Hill and why we're doing them so regularly. We need to bring these experts across the key stakeholders of AI together to hold these events regularly so that we keep our finger on the pulse of the evolutionary landscape of artificial intelligence and public policy. So shifting then to policy, we've talked a lot about how businesses are using the technology themselves and what are the characteristics within businesses that are driving effective AI implementation. And Avi, I'll shift this to you because I know you've done a lot of thinking about it. What can policymakers do and what types of policies could be in place to help facilitate successful AI adoption and implementation?
Okay, that's like a 10-day course, but I'll try to summarize it in a couple minutes.
Great.
So starting with a couple of first principles, a lot of the policies we already have in place, we can think of as AI policies. If you want a strong social safety net, then you're going to want a strong social safety net as AI diffuses, because you're going to want to protect people who may lose their jobs because of it, at least in the short term. If you feel that businesses should be free to have more choices in what they do, then you're going to be in favor of light regulation on AI, because the exact policies that you think apply to other industry, there's nothing really different here. Okay. To the extent there's anything different here, there's two things to think about. So the first one is, as I've said, AIs are essentially prediction machines, and we humans have to tell them what to do. Okay. What that means is you shouldn't let anybody get away with saying an AI made that decision. And so in law, it is useful to have a human responsible for every AI outcome. And there's different proposals on how this works, but essentially a company shouldn't be able to say, you know what, yes, that bad thing happened, but it wasn't my fault because I deployed an AI. And so that's a very specific policy that is not really telling companies or anybody what to do, but saying, let's understand that these are still machines, they are tools, and the humans who use tools are responsible for the tools that they use. Now, another element to this is that these, AI feeds on data. Okay? And so there is a question, which is how much do we want privacy versus how much do we want AI-based innovation? I'd love to be able to tell you there's no trade-off, but I'm an economist. I'm all about trade-offs. And you need to recognize that the more we restrict data flows, what companies do with data, the harder it will be to build AI tools. And so as state by state, country by country, we need to decide what balance we want. And with the caveat that if every state has a different set of policies, that will ultimately where we'll land, many companies will have to land on whatever the strictest state is doing, which then ultimately leads, the state that's deciding on the strictest privacy policy gets to determine how much innovation, AI-based innovation we have.
Yeah, that's great. I'd just like to add a little bit more to that, Avi, and build off of that, and that policymakers have tremendous influence on incentivizing the types of decisions that businesses make. And traditionally, policymakers have incentivized technology diffusion through the use of capital incentives. And these have been successful in the past because traditionally businesses have been made up of tangible assets such as computers and servers and bricks and mortars. But since the introduction of AWS and cloud computing, firms are increasingly relying on more data and digital services. But to date, in every OECD country, we still have capital incentives in place that are still targeted towards those traditional tangible assets. And if we think about these tangible assets as substitutes for some of these intangibles like cloud, we know that the presence of these policies could create distortions in the market. And there is some initial evidence that's come out of the UK which suggests that businesses that qualify for these tangible capital incentives are more likely to use a server versus cloud versus investing in data. And those same types of firms are substantially less likely to adopt AI. So I think as policymakers, when we design these types of technology incentive policies, we need to think about not just the physical tools, but all of these intangible tools that also help to facilitate the diffusion of artificial intelligence.
I think there is no way that we can scale AI, especially for non-technology organization, if we don't invest in more mature digital footprint, so the cloud, and in our foundational data platforms. That's so, especially focusing, not only on companies that sells AI, but mostly on companies that use AI. How can we scale AI for those companies? And I think digital footprint and data foundational capabilities are key to scale this.
Great, go ahead.
Just one more thing on the considerations for policymakers. I wanted to just point out that it's really critical both at the federal level, congressional level, state and local level, international level, to focus on risk. So we talked a lot about, a variety of uses of AI technologies. There are very low risk, high reward use cases that don't necessarily need the same level of regulation or guardrails in place that a more high risk type use case would require. And I also think it's important to consider there's a lot of work happening at the international and domestic level around standards and standardizing risk management processes and governance strategies. And there's a lot of good thinking going on that incorporates academia, industry, policymakers, a lot of folks at the table trying to get to some interoperable standards and provisions that can be used in legislation so as not to have, I think Avi was maybe hedging towards this concept of like a patchwork of different provisions or laws that we see right now in the States with regard to data privacy, and trying to avoid that and trying to get to some measure of interoperability so that companies have assurances that their compliance mechanisms in one place are transferable, in another jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's great. You want to jump in there?
Jump on that? Yeah. So, that's what I was hinting at. I absolutely agree. When we think about risk, though, you got to be careful, which is often the industries with the biggest risk have the most potential. So if you say high risk is education and healthcare, then you're much less likely to have AI in education and healthcare. And and if you say, well, that's okay, just high risk means you need to hire a couple lawyers and then you'll be fine. I help run a startup program, and every time a team of scientists needs to hire a lawyer, the startup dies. Okay. Not that lawyers are so hard, but it's just not of interest to them. And so when you think about risk, just make sure that you're not imagining risks that aren't really there, at least relative to the status quo. And so another version of that is thinking through, yes, AIs are going to make mistakes in healthcare. Yes, AIs are going to be biased in education. They are. But our current processes aren't so fantastic. And so as long as we're understanding risk as a benchmark against what's already happening, then fantastic. But if we're thinking about risk as the AI can never make a bad healthcare decision, then what's going to happen is we'll continue with what many people think are our relatively mediocre processes that we have already. And we're going to get fantastic AI and marketing technology, And you can feel like about that as you want, and we're not going to get great AI in healthcare or education.
Great. Well, we've got just a little bit of time left before we move on to the Q&A, so I'd like to do just one final question and ask the impossible from each of our speakers, and just give a few words so we can go to the Q&A. But the question is, so AI is deploying and developing rapidly, and technology is advancing so quickly. Where do we expect AI to be in 10 years?
I think,
Fabio, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very hard question. You know, like a few days ago, I was talking, you know, in the process of understanding policies and governance, I was talking to an industry expert, and he basically told me, you know, writing a policy for Gen AI is like writing a science fiction book, because it changes every day. So 10 years from now, it's a long time. But I think we should all be excited about what's happening, what started to happen now with agentic AI. So imagine those capabilities that we've been describing distributed across multiple AI agents, where each agent is tasked to address a specific use cases in collaboration with all the other agents. So I think we are going to a place where really now intelligent automation can really help design better processes. So I don't know about the specific tools, but I think that's what we should expect.
Great. Erin?
I think we can anticipate and be excited about many fewer rote manual tasks. Like we talked about filling out forms and things like that, just, you know, existing as an adult. There's so many, you know, as a worker, a learner, an adult, a family member, like there are so many tasks that take a lot of time and can be really repetitive, and you know, being able to assign those tasks to an agentic AI, you know, function or you know, an AI system is exciting to me personally. But I also think there's just a great opportunity for businesses to embrace a lot of that work being covered by AI systems to allow their teams to be more creative, to come up with like new solutions that, you know, encompass some of their soft skills and their relationships with their coworkers and their perspective on, you know, being a human in the world, and instead of, you know, assigning so much time to filling out paperwork or the tasks that you have to do every day to, you know, fulfill your job capabilities.
Okay.
Bobby?
I'm going to cheat a little bit. So I'm going to describe the pessimistic scenario and the optimistic, or an optimistic scenario. So a pessimistic scenario was we're exactly where we are now. Okay, as in no one wants to design any new systems. The regulatory environment is really restrictive. There's not a lot of competition, and firms don't want to do that much more. And so we have point solutions where AIs allow us to do things that we always did, but a little bit better, and no workflows are reorganized. And I think that pessimistic solution, like scenario, is possible. I don't think it's likely, but I think it's possible. But I think more possible, and the one I want to hope for, is the optimistic solution. And the optimistic solution includes both of yours, but even more than that. The optimistic scenario is that AI embeds itself in all sorts of aspects of our lives. We have agents that can help us with all the things we don't want to do. Those agents compete with each other in a rigorous competitive environment, so we're not, so we don't get locked into, you know, any one company's help. And as a consequence, our productivity increases not just the 2% a year that it's been increasing for decades, but we start to move to 3 or 4 or 5%, or maybe even more. And that means that, you know, with compound growth, 10 years is good, 20 years is better, and we can have just an awful lot more of whatever it is that we want. And I think this technology is likely to be the next general purpose technology. And so that scenario is a real scenario that lots of otherwise serious economists are very excited about.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for listening to our organized panel discussion. We'd next like to move it on to the audience. So if there's any questions that you have for the panelists, please raise your hand, and we'll pass a mic around.
Thank you for coming here, and it's really an interesting event. I thought of asking, like, EU has their privacy policy, GDPR. EU has their Securities Act. EU has their like AI Act as well. They released it last year. I thought of asking, is it the right time for United States to have that initiative to launch, to work on their policy, federal policy, not state policy, on AI as well as privacy? I want to hear your thoughts.
I think that's one for, yeah, you go ahead.
I was just going to start by saying, like, yes, of course, there should be work being done on a federal policy around AI and privacy, data privacy for that matter, in my opinion. I think that's a worthy effort. Without that work being done, we are likely to see this evolution of state laws becoming like more of a patchwork like we have with privacy. So I think it's a worthy effort, but I think there needs to be champions identified in that effort who are willing and able and capable of aligning the right group of stakeholders to get to the right answers. And it's not an easy task.
Okay.
Understatement of the administration.
So I think there are two parts to that question. The second part I'll answer first, which is a patchwork of state laws good? And I think the answer is probably not. And to the extent that we could overcome that and figure out as a country what the law should be, that would be better. But the first part of the question set it up with Europe. Okay. And my understanding of the impact of the European regulation is it has not been good for the European technology industry. Okay. And so that doesn't mean it hasn't been good for Europe. They have made a decision that the way they've defined privacy and defined risk outweighs the impacts on economic growth through the technology industry. Okay. And we've seen negative impact on venture capital, negative impact on firm adoption of technology, and to many people's surprise, a negative impact on competition. Because again, once you need all these lawyers to do anything, then you'll just trust the biggest players because you know if somebody gets sued, it's going to be the biggest players. Okay. And so, as any country can decide where they want to stand on this, but if you're going to go with a European-style regulation, you should go in with eyes wide open about what happened with the European-style regulation.
Great. I think we had a couple questions over here.
Hi. Which country do you think seems to be doing a good job when it comes to maintaining data privacy and also allowing data flow?
Yeah, we're here. I mean,
Please, go ahead.
I think that we have the industry and innovation and adherence to compliance, but keeping in mind those desires to remain competitive and not put consumer data at risk, but also be very clear and forward thinking about the best ways to involve that consumer in the decision making that's going on as companies are managing data, controlling, processing data, that sort of thing. I think we've had the most innovative and friendly for both consumers and industry approaches so far.
I agree. I mean, again, using my experience as an example, it's amazing what we've been able to do, in 6 years. So I think we have a framework that if there is willingness to invest, there are possibilities in the U.S.
Excellent.
And at the same time, protecting the customer.
Great. We also had a question here from the gentleman in the front row.
So it's funny that you.
Yeah.
It's funny that you said that the two most difficult places to adopt AI are education and healthcare. So I'm the dean of a university, and I'm the dean of nursing. and health sciences. And so I do see that, right? And so it's kind of funny because I straddle both of the difficult sides. In healthcare, it has been a challenge because we are looking at a lot of different challenges and how patients perceive getting instructions from an AI or getting diagnoses from an AI. But in the allied health, the technology has really outpassed. I mean, and so even in communication disorder, you can use AI to teach people how to speak and communicate in different ways if they're nonverbal and whatnot. My question is, what advice would you have for me, I guess, right, to kind of maybe promote AI with people who are unwilling to do it a little bit?
I would say, again, the soft skills are really important. So if they're confident and comfortable in their interactions with patients and administration and leadership, they may be more attuned to or inclined to use the technology to kind of take away some of the more time-consuming or squirrely types of problems that they encounter in their day-to-day job. I actually just this morning heard about a new study that was released that includes a taxonomy of all the use cases in healthcare for AI, and it includes the challenges or the barriers to adoption there. I have a copy of it and I'll share it with you. But I think, like you said, there's so much opportunity, but it's a matter of elevating the things that maybe are softer skills or are things that really bring like the human element to working with patients and working in healthcare that I think are going to be really important.
Yeah, I think this is probably one good example where we should not see AI as a replacing a human, but as augmenting the human. So, maybe you don't put the AI in front of the customer, but you put it in the hands of the doctor. And that's could be a powerful tool, depending on the use case, helping the doctor to help the patient more. So it's not on the face of the customer, but it's an amazing tool, a new tool in the hands of doctors.
So I think we should talk more. But to me, nurses might be the biggest beneficiaries of AI in the entire world. Okay, and that is in some sense because we're automating what doctors are doing. Okay, so it's not automation versus. So I had a paper in Science that came out a couple of years ago where we talk about one person's augmentation as another's automation, and vice versa. And so in the process of automating a lot of what doctors do, that really has potential to superpower nurses if we can train them to be able to use those tools well. And so you are incredibly well positioned as the dean of a college of nursing and others to try to figure out and start that transition.
Hi, I'm actually a student at Florida International University, and I am a graduate student in Health Services Administration. So I think for me, service and health services is like the focal point of what an administrator should do. So my question is to whoever, how would you think that we can eliminate bias within the AI realm? Because as in healthcare, many populations have a mistrust in healthcare or even the corporate arena or criminal justice system. So if we're only relying on it to be good enough, then how can we really trust that AI will benefit all?
I mean, I think the short answer is don't trust the AI. you know there is going to be bias, as Avi said before, but there are biases today without AI. So with that in mind, there are biases, so that be aware of that and come up with the ways to measure that bias and take that into consideration, factor that in the decision making.
I think some of the bias as well can come through the data deserts and the fact that there's a lack of good representation of data across minority groups. And I think we're going to have another event later that talks about the importance of data for algorithms in an upcoming Georgetown on the Hill event. But it's very important that we have really well collected data on representing all people within society such that we have tools that are less biased or under-biased for those particular groups. And that gets to the point that Avi said about that trade-off with privacy. And obtaining some of that data is difficult, and policymakers need to think of additional ways in which we can ensure that data is collected and representative across all people within a multicultural environment.
Hello. My question is for the gentleman from Tapestry, and my question is, can you please share some few simple steps to build data capabilities as a small business within various operational units of the business, like sales and business development, project management? Because I've heard this term, build data capabilities. Like, what does that mean in very simple terms for a small business like mine?
Great question, thank you. So first of all, you have to have access to data. So, there are some business reality that just don't have data. So if you work in a business where you do have access to data as a source, or you generate data, data has to be there. And then what I always recommend is start from the business use case. Data is there to enable something. Don't just start, there are a lot of companies often, get excited and start building this massive data warehousing. And then when it's done, after hundreds of millions of dollars and after years, they're like, okay, we have it now, but nobody's using it. So always start from the use case, even if it's small, and then, retroactively, you understand what data points you need to address that use case. And once you identify the data, you just have to bring the data in. And bringing the data in requires some engineering work. Depending on the use case, do you need the data real time? Do you need it doesn't matter if the data is like 1 day old, or depending on the use case, right? And then you just need some engineering work to bring the data in. So you may have to build some pipes that pump the data into your system. You have to organize the data so they're easy to leverage for whatever application you want to put on top. And then it's important to govern the data. So, single source of truth, who has access to data, and because, the worst case that can happen is no governance. So there are like multiple data points for the same KPI that creates confusion and loss of trust. So you end up in a situation where there's analysis paralysis and nobody trusts the data. So there are few elements, but first understanding, do you have access to data? Yes. What's the business use case? What data do I need to address and optimize that business use case? And then start building, you have to build a box to put data in, but with governance and control in place. And then ideally, when you start implementing solutions, you also have in mind how to measure the outcome. Because no solution is good if you can't tell if it's good or not. So you have to have in mind clear data points to measure the success of whatever you implemented on top of that data. So you're able to monitor and to measure the impact. So as I said before, right, having organized data fabric and foundational data capability is important. So it's a complex, depending on the business reality, it could be complex, but hopefully I answer your question. Those are maybe the building blocks to start with.
I realize that there's more questions in the audience, but I'm just cognizant of time, both for the people here and also the people that are live streaming on YouTube for this event. So I'd like to transition to the networking and lunch event afterwards, but I would just like to thank everybody in the room for attending this event. I want to highlight, I think this was a very active and engaging conversation. And the reason for that was we pulled together the key stakeholders of AI again, which are academics, policy, and industry experts. And we're very thankful to be able to participate here on Capitol Hill today. We hope that we get to do it again, and we look forward to hearing everyone in the audience shortly. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you.